Hi there, my name is David, and I'm part of the team here at MyWorks Software. On behalf of our team, I'd like to welcome you to MyWorks Sync, and I look forward to showing you how to easily set up our sync and begin syncing with QuickBooks Online. Today, I'll show you how to set up our WooCommerce sync for QuickBooks and review some of the common questions and setup steps that we see most often used as you begin to set up and use our sync. The setup process is quite simple, and by the end of it, your WooCommerce and QuickBooks will be completely in sync, and you'll be able to sync your WooCommerce customers, orders, products, inventory, and more with QuickBooks in real time. As a reminder, everything that we review in the video is already available in our support site. You can also review these support articles for the same step-by-step instructions you'll see here today to get your sync all set up, as well as best practices and additional documentation on how to use other features of our sync. We also included a complimentary setup call and screen share with our paid plans, and you can easily schedule that within your account with us if you'd like extra help with setup or just have questions about your setup you've already done. We also include support via support ticket, and our team is available 24/7 within your account to answer any additional questions you have as you begin setting up our sync or even when you're done and continue to use our sync. We'll begin by reviewing our Before You Install doc on our support site. This breaks down the very basic requirements you'll have before you begin getting set up, which is simply having a WooCommerce store and admin access to QuickBooks to get our app connected. That's here on our support site at support.myworks.software. We have a few different categories, but we'll start in the Getting Started section in the top. Our Before You Install doc is the first doc there, and simply has a few requirements: having an active QuickBooks Online company, an active WooCommerce store with admin access, and having our sync installed and activated. And that's where we'll get started today. Jumping into your WooCommerce store, if you go to the Plugins menu on the left and then Add New, simply search for MyWorks in the top right. You'll see us pop up as the first option, and then simply click Install and Activate. Once activated, you'll see our sync show up in the top left of your WooCommerce menu bar. This is where you'll be able to continue to use our sync going forward, as well as where we'll conduct most of our setup here today. To begin, visit the MyWorks Sync menu in the top left, and we'll start on the Connection menu. First, you'll paste your license key in, which you'd receive from your account with us. At this point, you'd want to make sure you simply have either a free or paid plan with us at myworks.software. You can easily sign up for one here if you don't have one, and you can manage that within your account with us. Once you've signed up, you'll be able to view your plan within the My Plans menu of your account, and you'll be able to copy your license key here within that plan. We'll paste that into the license key field and continue. Once activated, we'll continue to connect to QuickBooks Online. We'll visit the Connect menu here on the left, which will bring you into your account with us. You'll see the green Connect to QuickBooks button on the left, and you'll be able to easily hit Connect to then sign into your company and connect to QuickBooks Online. It's important to make sure you sign in as a company admin user, as those users are typically the only ones that have permission to connect apps to your QuickBooks Online company. Once connected, you can return to your WooCommerce store. Your connection page will now show connected on the right with your company information. And now we can move into getting set up. As a note, this setup is for QuickBooks Online. So if you're using QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks POS, while MyWorks does support syncing with those platforms, this isn't the right setup video for you. So if you don't have QuickBooks Online, we recommend you switch to the correct spot in our documentation site and find the correct setup video. Now that we're connected to QuickBooks, let's go ahead and get started with moving on to the next step of setup, which is reviewing our mappings. We'll visit the Map menu here on the left under MyWorks Sync, and there's a few tabs across the top of the page that let us control what type of data we'd like to map together. We'll start with the products. Mapping your products is usually one of the most important parts of your setup, and there's a few different ways that you can handle this. For example, if you're just setting up your WooCommerce store and you have no products in WooCommerce and all of your products are in QuickBooks, you can easily use our sync to pull those products from QuickBooks to WooCommerce if you'd like. That's done here in the pull menu on the left, which we'll review here in a little bit. Conversely, if your products are only in WooCommerce and not in QuickBooks, you can easily use our Push tab on the left to push those products from WooCommerce and create them in QuickBooks automatically. Or if you're already using your WooCommerce store in QuickBooks for a little while, and your products are already in both WooCommerce and in QuickBooks, this mapping tab is where we'll begin. Here on our mapping menu for products, you'll be able to easily link or map your products between WooCommerce and QuickBooks. This is important as our sync begins to sync orders, inventory, and pricing levels to be able to ensure that the right products in WooCommerce are linked to the desired products in QuickBooks. For example, here on the left, you'll see your list of WooCommerce products, and in the drop-down here on the right, you'll see your list of QuickBooks items. There's a few different ways to easily map these together, as our mappings are very flexible. For example, the first product here seems to be called Blue T-shirt, and looking at our list of QuickBooks items, we see a similar product name called Blue T-shirt. And we can easily select that and then save on the left to map those together. Those will then be mapped until either one of those products are deleted or the mapping is changed. However, we also support automatically mapping your products, which can be very easy if you have more than a few products and you would like to save time instead of having to click through each one of these drop-downs. To do that, you can simply choose the two fields that match each other. So here in the WooCommerce field, for example, we could choose name, and in the QuickBooks field, we could choose name as well. This would, if we hit automap here, this would automatically match together any products where your WooCommerce name matches your QuickBooks name. The most common setup here is by SKU. For example, most of our users will have the same SKU in both WooCommerce and QuickBooks, which saves them a good amount of time from having to click through each one of these dropdowns, and instead simply auto-match their products by SKU. And this isn't an either-or process. You can both auto-map your products and manually match some other ones. So for example, let's say we'll auto-map our products by name. We'll hit auto-map, and when the page reloads, we'll see the products that is automatically matched together with a matching name. Scrolling through here, it looks like it's found 4, which is great. However, for example, for the MyWorks socks menu or product, say we don't have a product like that has an exact name for that in QuickBooks, but we want to map it to another product like services. That can easily be matched here and then saved. Our mappings, because of how flexible they are, do not need or require your SKUs or your names to be the same. You can manually match them any way you'd like to. The AutoMap tool simply helps save you time if your products happen to have the same name or SKU. And again, remember, the mapping is only needed if your products are already in both WooCommerce and in QuickBooks, and you need to link them together. If they're only in WooCommerce and you like to push them to QuickBooks, you can easily do that in our push menu on the left. Or if they're in QuickBooks and you'd like to pull them into WooCommerce, you can easily do so in our pull menu on the left instead. Once our products are mapped, we can hit save. And there's a few different areas of this mapping page that are helpful to be aware of. First, you'll notice on the top left, there's 2 tabs, the Products tab on the left and Variations. Products is going to show you all of your simple products by default, as well as any other products you have like bundle or composite products, which you can easily map in the same way. However, you can also filter here. You can filter just to show simple products, group products, bundled products, etc. We don't show variable products here in this list by default because on this page, you'll only see the parent variable product, which is not necessary to map. Instead, our sync supports mapping each individual variation, which you can do here in the Variations tab here on the left. This allows you to see every different option or variation for your product, like a black color and a white color, and individually map those to QuickBooks if desired. Again, here on the Variations page, you can also auto-map by name or by SKU as well, to make it very easy to link them if they already exist in QuickBooks. And as a reminder, if they don't, no problem. You can easily use our push page to push your variations from WooCommerce into QuickBooks if you'd like. One helpful note as you work through these mappings is we have filters on both pages that let you map or filter to only see products that are mapped or unmapped. That wraps up our review of our mappings page. So again, this is really the most time-intensive part of setup, as it depends on how many products you have and how cleanly they are set up and matching between WooCommerce and QuickBooks. If you have to go through each one of these and manually match them together, that's perfectly fine. It might take a bit more time than auto mapping them, but it's not a requirement that their names or SKUs be the same. So it's up to you how you'd like to map these together. And again, these help us accurately sync data into QuickBooks when we're syncing an order, for example, to include the right products in the QuickBooks order, and when we're syncing inventory levels or pricing to make sure it's syncing between the right products in WooCommerce and in QuickBooks. Moving on from the product mappings, there's a few other tabs that we'll visit. The customer mapping tab here on the left is optional. It's not a requirement to match your customers between WooCommerce and QuickBooks, even if they are already in both WooCommerce and QuickBooks. The reason for this is every time we're syncing an order to QuickBooks, we'll always check QuickBooks first before we sync the order to see if that customer exists. And we check by name and by email. And this can be adjusted in our settings if there's other or a different order you'd like us to check for existing customers in QuickBooks. But because we already do so when we're syncing an order, if your customers are already in QuickBooks, although it would be easy to auto-map them together and certainly not an issue, it's not a requirement. Because if their name or email address in QuickBooks is the same as in WooCommerce, we'll already find them as we're syncing the order into QuickBooks. The cases where our customer mappings are helpful is if you have multiple customers in WooCommerce that you'd like to sync to a specific QuickBooks customer, or if their name or email in WooCommerce does not match their name or email in QuickBooks. For example, say Ashley Smith on the top, we know that she's associated with Abercrombie International Group, for example. And whenever she places an order in WooCommerce, we want to make sure that order syncs to Abercrombie International Group. Maybe the same for Jason. Possibly both Jason and Ashley work at Abercrombie. You can easily match those together, and these mappings help override any checks that we're doing when we're syncing that order into QuickBooks to find an existing customer. Because if the customer is mapped here, we'll always follow that mapping first before checking QuickBooks to see if that customer exists. So in summary, your customer mappings are not required, but only necessary if you would like to tie specific WooCommerce customers to specific QuickBooks customers where their names and emails might not match. As a reminder for pushing customers, although this is certainly possible in the push menu on the left, it's also not necessary. Whenever we're syncing an order, if we can't find that customer in QuickBooks, we'll always automatically create that customer in QuickBooks for you. So it's not necessary to simply push customers. If you just push orders, that will automatically create the customer in QuickBooks. If you would not like us to create a new customer in QuickBooks for every order, we do have settings that we'll review here in a moment to let you easily sync all your orders to one or some QuickBooks customers instead. So don't worry about that. Moving on from our customer mappings, let's visit our payment mappings on the right. This is where you can match individual WooCommerce gateways that are currently active on your site to different bank accounts in QuickBooks. So when we sync the orders from those payment methods in WooCommerce to QuickBooks, they hit the correct bank accounts in QuickBooks. On this page, it will show you any gateways currently active on your site. So on this demo site, we have cash on delivery, PayPal, and Stripe enabled. But don't worry if your site doesn't match what you're seeing here, because this simply pulls from what WooCommerce gateways you currently have active on your site. For example, let's turn on payment syncing for PayPal, and we'll say we want to give those PayPal orders a payment method of card. And this payment method is simply a label in QuickBooks. There's no wrong choice, and you can create your own in QuickBooks, which will show up here once you've added them in QuickBooks. Secondly, we can choose a QuickBooks bank account. This is where you'd like the payment for that order syncing into QuickBooks. We'll choose undeposited funds here, for example. If you're using PayPal, normally you'd already have a PayPal bank already set up in QuickBooks that you'd be able to select here. We have excellent documentation on best recommendations for syncing payments with popular payment methods like PayPal, Stripe, and others. We'll turn that on for Stripe as well, for example. Again, we can choose card as a payment method and say we'll have this going to undeposited funds. Good to hit save here, and that will save these payment methods. It's important to make sure you set these if desired before you start syncing orders to make sure that when those orders do sync to QuickBooks, they're hitting the right bank accounts. If you're not sure what bank accounts to set here, the question that you would want to ask either yourself or your accountant is which bank account those would be tied to in QuickBooks if you were to manually enter the order instead of having us sync it. The answer to that question is the bank account that you would set here. There's also advanced options on the top right. These let you control a few additional details around how we sync and handle payment methods. For example, you can choose whether we sync refunds, which is enabled by default. We also have the ability to sync transaction fees, and those can sync into QuickBooks as a line item in the order, as a journal entry, or part of a bank deposit, which is part of our batch support feature. We have great documentation articles on how to set up all of these as well. Our batch support feature is very helpful if you have a credit card processor that sends bank deposits to a real-life bank account either once a day or once a week. This can easily, in addition to syncing your orders individually to QuickBooks, also create a bank deposit in QuickBooks that batches or groups those orders together and includes them in one bank deposit in your QuickBooks company, with or without the transaction fees removed, which makes it very easy to reconcile or match that together. It's not a requirement, and it's only a helpful or additionally helpful step in easily reconciling once we've synced those orders to QuickBooks. We also have the ability to set terms for your specific terms for a gateway in QuickBooks as well. Once your payment methods are mapped, we'll normally move on to our settings, but we'll go ahead and visit a few of the other tabs here on this page first. If you're outside of the US and using taxes in WooCommerce and in QuickBooks, you'll see a tax rate tab here on the top right. If you're inside of the US, whether you charge taxes or not, you generally won't see a tax rate tab here, and that's not a cause for concern. This is because QuickBooks Online already has automated sales tax enabled for QuickBooks companies within the US. And this mapping is all handled behind the scenes automatically by us. So if you're in the US, you have automated sales tax enabled in QuickBooks, which would be when you visit the taxes tab in your QuickBooks company. There's no need to match your tax rates together, regardless of how you handle taxes in WooCommerce. That's already and will be handled behind the scenes. If you're outside of the US, you'll normally be able to add manual tax rates in QuickBooks based on the tax rates you'd like to charge. Once those are added, simply visit our tax rate mapping page. You'll see the taxes on the left that we've pulled from your WooCommerce store. And on the right, you'll see a list of your taxes in QuickBooks. And typically this is as easy as mapping these up like this. You'll want to make sure that the rate of your WooCommerce tax rate matches the rate of your QuickBooks tax rate to make sure that orders are able to sync accurately. And again, the rows here on the left are pulling from your WooCommerce tax rates already set up in your WooCommerce store. So if you haven't yet set up taxes in your WooCommerce store and you know you need to charge tax, we'd recommend you set those up first and then revisit this page where you'll be able to map them with QuickBooks. Our support team is super helpful in answering any questions you have around either setting up taxes in your WooCommerce store or mapping those together once they're set up in both WooCommerce and QuickBooks. Here on the right, we have an additional field for custom fields, which you won't see by default, although our sync does support custom field mapping in its core. The reason for this is because our support team is able to help you set up custom field mapping if that's something that you intend to use. We have a very helpful support article on how to open up a ticket with our team to request mapping a custom field. And this generally applies to when you're syncing orders from WooCommerce to QuickBooks. For example, if you have a custom field in your WooCommerce order, we're able to send it to a variety of custom fields or existing fields in your QuickBooks order to help add additional data to that QuickBooks order and make it as accurate as possible. So this is something our support team is easily able to help you set up and is included with all of our paid plans. Now that we've had a chance to review mappings, let's jump into our settings menu here on the left, which is the only other part of setup. Here in the settings menu, you're able to control a variety of different ways that our sync handles data, as well as what type of data you'd like us to sync between WooCommerce and QuickBooks. Here in our default tab, there's a few default accounts, and these are required to be set up before you continue syncing. Here on the top, we have our setting called Default Fund Match Products. Normally, this will be automatically created for you in QuickBooks, and this drop-down on the right is a list of your QuickBooks items. This defaults to this item called Default Fund Match Products, and as the tooltips on the right explain, this is used if we're syncing an order to QuickBooks where one of those products is not mapped. This helps act as a fallback, so we can still sync that order for you, but the item in that order in QuickBooks would simply be this default because you haven't matched it yet to a QuickBooks item. This can be helpful if you don't need to match all your products together, or if you're simply needing a little bit more time to map your products and you'd like to start syncing orders in the meantime. The next three options down are simply our default accounts for if you're syncing new products from WooCommerce to QuickBooks. If you don't plan on syncing products from WooCommerce to QuickBooks, you can ignore these as it won't matter what is set here. If you do use our sync to sync new products from WooCommerce to QuickBooks, you'll want to make sure these are set to the desired accounts before you start syncing products. For example, and again, just to clarify, these would be the same products that you would choose if you were to manually create a product within QuickBooks Online. This very first income account is typically an income account called sales of product income. The second inventory asset account is typically an asset account called inventory or stock asset. And this cost of goods account is typically called a cost of goods or cost of sales account. Once these are accurately set, you'll be able to sync products into QuickBooks either manually or automatically through our sync. Lastly, you'll be able to choose a default QuickBooks shipping product. We have a few different ways we can sync shipping fees from WooCommerce into QuickBooks in an order, either as a line item here, or if you have the subtotal field of shipping turned on in QuickBooks, it can sync in as a shipping subtotal field. We'll go ahead and choose a shipping product or maybe a product called services for now. If you're using multiple currencies in WooCommerce and in QuickBooks, you'll see an additional area here where you can set which currencies you plan to offer, and you'll be able to easily map those to different bank accounts in QuickBooks. If you only have one currency in WooCommerce and QuickBooks, no need to worry, you simply won't see this section here. We have a few different other tabs here in our settings page, and a lot of them are optional and only need to be adjusted if you need to change the way that our sync syncs data with QuickBooks. In terms of defaults, there's only a small amount of defaults that you need to set before you begin to use our sync, and those are on our default tab here. We'll briefly cover a few of these other tabs here, but again, as a reminder, normally these settings don't need to be adjusted and only need to be changed if you've begun to sync data and need to change in small ways how we sync different types of data, like orders, products, or mapping customers. Moving into the order menu on the top, this contains a good amount of settings that let you control in small ways how we sync orders with QuickBooks. The only important setting on this tab is the very first one, how you would like WooCommerce orders to sync to QuickBooks. The default that will be set here always is sales receipt. This will sync your WooCommerce orders from WooCommerce into QuickBooks as a sales receipt in QuickBooks. If this is how you'd like orders to sync, there's nothing you need to adjust here and you can leave the setting as is. If you'd prefer orders sync into QuickBooks as an invoice with a payment if they're paid in WooCommerce, you'd want to adjust the setting to invoice. We also support syncing orders into QuickBooks as an estimate. Besides these three initial options, we have additional advanced options on the right to sync orders to QuickBooks either on a per role basis or per gateway basis. What this means, for example, is say you have a wholesale user or a wholesale role in WooCommerce where you'd like those orders to sync into QuickBooks as invoices, but you'd like other orders from maybe guests or customers to sync into QuickBooks as sales receipts. This can be easily controlled here if you'd like some orders to sync as sales receipts and others to sync as invoices, for example. Very similarly, if you'd instead like orders to sync to QuickBooks as either a gateway or as either an invoice or sales receipt based on the gateway they were paid with, you can set this to per gateway. And this would be shown in the map menu on the left and payment methods once you set this. In each gateway, you'd be able to choose whether we sync those orders to QuickBooks as an invoice, a sales receipt, or an estimate. These are more advanced options and typically aren't used unless you have very specific logic on how you'd like those orders to sync to QuickBooks. Again, the default is sales receipt, and you may change that as desired. The rest of the options here are again optional. We encourage you to read through them if you're interested. And again, only need to change them if either the name of it is something that you'd like us to sync, or we have tooltips on the right that have additional information. Another important setting on this page that's helpful is our setting of when to sync orders. You'll notice on the right, we have processing and completed set here. This means that we'll automatically sync new orders to QuickBooks only when they reach the status of processing and or completed in your WooCommerce store. And this is simply the defaults that will be here when you first begin using our sync. If you'd like orders also on hold to automatically sync to QuickBooks, you can easily set this here. Or maybe you would only like orders to sync to QuickBooks once they're changed to the status of completed. You could set only completed as the option here. Again, the statuses you set here simply tell us at what point you'd like new orders to sync to QuickBooks based on the status that they reach. Moving on from the Order tab, we'll visit the Product tab. The settings on this tab would apply when we're syncing products either to QuickBooks or from QuickBooks to WooCommerce. Again, these are also optional and already set to default, so they'd only need to be changed if you need to change in different ways how we're syncing these products. For example, you can choose what description field we use when we sync products, either to or from QuickBooks. By default, this is set to none, so we don't override longer descriptions you have in QuickBooks or specific longer descriptions you have in WooCommerce or specific descriptions you have in QuickBooks. However, you can change this to instead use the WooCommerce product name, description, or even short description. You can also choose what description or field in WooCommerce to use for the purchase description in QuickBooks, as well as set what you'd like the product name to be when syncing products both from QuickBooks to WooCommerce and from WooCommerce to QuickBooks. Moving on to the taxes menu. You won't see this tab again if you're in the United States and you have automated sales tax enabled in QuickBooks. So completely normal if you don't see this and you're within the United States. If you're outside of the United States, the only required setting here to set will be what rate in your QuickBooks company is set as the non-taxable rate. This is typically no VAT or out of scope, but it can vary based on what tax rates are already set up on your site. Usually no VAT or out of scope is the appropriate option here, but it should be a 0% or non-taxable rate. And the only time this is used is if we're syncing an order to QuickBooks and at least one of those line items in the order is not taxed at all. Moving on to the mapping menu on the top, these settings are also optional and they're already set by default. Most importantly is our setting here to use the display name if we can't find an email match to find a matching customer in QuickBooks. What this means is when we're syncing an order, the first thing we'll check in QuickBooks if that customer is not mapped is to find a customer in QuickBooks with a matching email address. If we can find a customer with a matching email address, we'll sync that order right into that customer. If we can't, and if this setting is turned on, we'll also look for a customer with a matching name. If we can find a customer with a matching name, we'll sync that order right into that customer. If we can't, we'll create a new customer. The value in which we create new customers in QuickBooks is determined by the setting right above it, QuickBooks display name format for new customers. By default, this is the first and last name. So if John Smith places an order in WooCommerce, we can't find him in QuickBooks, we'll create him as a customer in QuickBooks called John Smith. For example, if you commonly sell to companies and you'd prefer the company name to be the display name in QuickBooks, you can easily hover over this tooltip to see available fields on the right. We'll notice one of those available fields is called company name, and we can easily set this to be company name instead. That way, if John Smith orders for Amazon Inc., for example, when we create that new customer in QuickBooks, it will be called Amazon Inc. Additional settings below here are also help change in small ways how we identify existing customers. One of the helpful settings that we covered earlier was our option here to sync all orders to one QuickBooks customer. This can be easily turned on if you wouldn't like each order or each customer in WooCommerce to be created in QuickBooks as we're syncing orders, and if you'd prefer your orders instead to sync to one single catch-all QuickBooks customer. This can be a great way to keep your customer list in QuickBooks from growing too quickly, while having all of your orders easily separated and individual in QuickBooks, simply under one customer. Here you choose the customer you'd like those orders to sync into, say for example, WooCommerce orders. And we have an additional option below to ignore or sync some orders from different roles to individual customers. This is commonly used if your site is selling both to wholesale and retail customers, for example. Retail customers that may never order again and you don't need to keep track of in QuickBooks, you could have synced to your catch-all customer in QuickBooks, while you could set wholesale role, for example, as roles to exclude from syncing to this customer and sync instead to individual customers in QuickBooks like normal. By default, nothing needs to be set in this field if you'd like all orders to sync to one customer in QuickBooks. We have a helpful setting below it to not sync any new customers in QuickBooks. This can be helpful if you prefer to keep a tighter control over who creates new customers in your QuickBooks, and prevent our sync from creating any customers in QuickBooks for you. If this is turned on, we will not create any new customers automatically in QuickBooks. And if we try and sync an order where we can't identify an existing customer in QuickBooks, that order will simply fail to sync, and will give you a reminder to create a customer in QuickBooks where you can then easily sync it again. Moving on to our pull menu, this simply has a few options on how we pull data from QuickBooks to WooCommerce, primarily inventory and products. Normally, this isn't something that needs to be adjusted unless you want to change the way our sync works. One of the most important and helpful tabs in our settings is our automatic sync menu here on the right. In this area, you can see a control panel that lets you both visually and manually control what type of data we're syncing, both from WooCommerce to QuickBooks, and in the lower section, the opposite direction, from QuickBooks to WooCommerce. In this area, you'll notice by default when you first begin using our sync that customer, order, and payment are the only switches turned on in the top section. This is intentional and is simply to protect any existing products, variations, or inventory levels you already have. So you are the one that gets to control when those begin automatically syncing. So by default, when you begin setting up our sync, once you finish our setup, you'll only see new customers, orders, and payments begin to automatically sync. We'll review in our push and pull menus how to easily push existing or past data into QuickBooks. But as a reminder, the only thing that this automatic sync panel controls is when we automatically sync new data with QuickBooks. As a reminder, when you first begin using our sync, we never do some big sync of your products, orders, customers, or any other data. So this helps protect and keep the same your data both in QuickBooks and in WooCommerce. We'll only automatically sync new data for you. So on this page, for example, in addition to syncing customers, orders, and payments to QuickBooks, we also have the ability to sync products both directions, as well as inventory and pricing levels from QuickBooks to WooCommerce. This can be helpful, for example, starting at the top, if you commonly add products in WooCommerce or variations. If you do so in WooCommerce and you'd like us to automatically sync those products or variations to QuickBooks as a new product, it's easy to turn these switches on. This saves you time from having to manually create that product in QuickBooks and link it together in our sync. Because if these settings are turned on, anytime you create a product in WooCommerce going forward, we'll automatically sync that to QuickBooks for you. Conversely, in the bottom section, if you instead create your products first in QuickBooks, we can easily sync those into WooCommerce for you once they're created in QuickBooks. This can be helpful so you don't have to create the product again in WooCommerce, and although you may go into WooCommerce to edit it and add additional information like a longer description, images, a category, etc., at least it's been created for you in WooCommerce, and it would then at that point be mapped together. So it's very easy to edit and then publish it in WooCommerce. As a small note, you can control what status it syncs into WooCommerce as, published, draft, or even pending, so it's not visible to your customers right away. We also support syncing inventory levels and pricing automatically from QuickBooks into WooCommerce. This is very commonly used and helpful if you commonly make inventory or pricing changes in QuickBooks. Normally, it's natural for inventory and pricing changes to happen in QuickBooks and not in WooCommerce. So these settings intentionally follow what usually naturally happens in terms of bookkeeping. For example, if you receive new inventory in QuickBooks from a bill that you've ordered from your vendor, that would increase your inventory in QuickBooks, which we can automatically sync to WooCommerce to keep your WooCommerce products up to date and matching QuickBooks. Also, if you create manual orders in QuickBooks, this can be helpful as that would reduce your inventory in QuickBooks, and we would automatically sync those changes into WooCommerce so those products' inventory levels match QuickBooks. Same for pricing. If you update pricing in QuickBooks, that can be easily updated in WooCommerce as well. So you're only changing that in one section in QuickBooks, and will keep your WooCommerce store up to date. We don't have an inventory switch in the top section because inventory changes that happen in WooCommerce as a result of orders being placed will automatically be reflected in QuickBooks. For example, if someone orders 2 products in WooCommerce, your WooCommerce products inventory will go down by 2, and as we sync that order into QuickBooks, that QuickBooks inventory would also be reduced by 2. So no need to worry you don't see an inventory switch on the top. That inventory changes in WooCommerce that happen as a result of orders will automatically be reflected in QuickBooks for you. You'll notice on the right that you can change when these intervals are that the syncing happens. By default, this is set to 5 minutes, but this can be easily changed and would depend on the plan that you have with us. That wraps up a tour of our settings. Again, the only defaults you normally need to set are here in our default menu on the left, and the rest of these are only optional and if you'd like to change how our sync works. We recommend still visiting your automatic sync tab to make sure you adjust these switches as desired. It's simply up to you whether you like us syncing products one or both directions and inventory or pricing from QuickBooks into WooCommerce. Moving on from our settings, the last two areas of our sync to review are our push and pull menus. But first, let's jump into our WooCommerce area on the left. Now that setup is completed, any new orders you see in WooCommerce will begin to sync to QuickBooks. You'll notice on the right that we've added a column for you called QuickBooks Status. This can be very helpful to see as orders begin syncing, what orders have synced to QuickBooks so far and which orders have not. In addition, you can easily click this green synced badge, which will bring you right into the order in QuickBooks. When you click into an order in WooCommerce, you'll notice on the right side we also have a QuickBooks widget. You can easily see the status of that order here. You can click the view button here to view it in QuickBooks as well. You can also click the update in QuickBooks button, which will push an update for this order into QuickBooks. Clicking the PDF button on the right will open the QuickBooks PDF of this order in a new tab for you to view or print. One helpful note is if you're making changes to your WooCommerce order, like changing the status or editing any details on the order, if you simply save that order in WooCommerce, we'll naturally push an update for that order to QuickBooks for you. So there's no need to click the Update in QuickBooks button unless you'd like to force an update for a specific reason. And again, as a reminder, for your orders, we'll only automatically sync new orders to QuickBooks. And that's where our push and pull menus come in handy. For example, if you have past weeks or days or months of data that you'd like to push into QuickBooks, our push menus are a very helpful spot to make that happen. You'll notice a few tabs across the right. For example, you can push customers into QuickBooks, although that's usually not necessary, as when you sync orders, that customer will come right along with the order automatically. You'll notice you have the ability to push orders, even refunds, as well as products and inventory levels. Jumping to products first, this can be very helpful if you have products already in WooCommerce, but they are not yet in QuickBooks and you'd like us to create them in QuickBooks for you. On the left, you'll notice a list of your items in WooCommerce. And again, you'll notice that we have a products and a variation section here, simply splitting out where you can see these variations in their own tab. And you can easily select the options on the left and then push to QuickBooks as desired. You'll also notice on the right, we'll show the product with a green check mark or a red X, depending on if it's been mapped to a QuickBooks product or not. This can be helpful to determine which products are not yet mapped, which would normally be the products you'd want to push to QuickBooks, knowing that they're not already there yet. Again, it's not a requirement to push your products to QuickBooks. It will simply depend on if you like them there or not. In addition, you can show multiple entries per page, and you can also search or filter by if the products are mapped or unmapped. Again, on the Variations tab, you'd see the same thing, a list of all of the variations in your WooCommerce store, and the ability to push multiple variations as desired. Moving to pushing orders, this is not necessary going forward as we'll automatically sync new orders for you. However, if you have past days or weeks or months of data that you need to sync into QuickBooks to get caught up to date, this orders page is a very helpful area to help push those and bring you up to date. You can easily search by order name or number, filter by order status, and then push orders as desired. We always recommend pushing one or two orders first as you begin to use our sync to easily view those in QuickBooks and see how they synced. This would allow you to make small changes to our settings or adjust if the orders are not syncing into QuickBooks in the way you'd like to. It's always easier to review this with one or two orders than after pushing 100 orders and realizing that there's a small change that needs to be made to how they synced. However, as a reminder, simply pushing an order that's already in QuickBooks, which you'd be able to see with this green check mark, will only update it in QuickBooks. So it's very safe and it would not duplicate it in QuickBooks. You can push an update to an order as many times as you'd like, and that will simply update that order in QuickBooks based on the way your current settings and mappings are set. So if you do need to re-push any orders, very easy to do so on this page by simply pushing them one more time. Visiting our pull menu on the left, you can easily pull data the opposite direction from QuickBooks to WooCommerce. You'll notice a few different tabs here. The most commonly used tabs are Product tab. This would show you a list of your products in QuickBooks, and you'd be able to easily pull them from QuickBooks into WooCommerce. Again, this can be helpful if you have most of your products in QuickBooks, but they're not yet in WooCommerce and you'd like our sync to create them in WooCommerce for you. Again, you'll notice the sync status here on the right, showing you which products are mapped together so far and which products are not. As a small note on this is why it's always helpful to map together your existing products first before you visit these pages. That way you know which products are already in WooCommerce and QuickBooks by these green check marks, and which products are not if you need to push or pull them based on these red X's. That wraps up reviewing our sync and how to both set it up and continue to use it going forward. Once you have adjusted our settings to sync either new orders, products, inventory levels, or more, you'll see that begin to kick in immediately, and data will begin syncing. As a reminder on the left, you can always visit our log menu to see recent activity in our sync. For example, any inventory levels that are synced, any customers, products, or orders, you'll always see a log of here on the left. If you're seeing issues with syncing customers, products, orders, or inventory, and they're either not syncing to QuickBooks as expected, or you're seeing an error when you try and push them, this log menu is a helpful place to go because you'll typically see a longer error here that explains what the issue is. Our support site is very great to help research those errors, but our support team is even more helpful. If you simply open up a ticket with our team, we're more than happy to help you view what might be going on, and it's typically a setting that needs to be adjusted or corrected that will resolve that and allow you to continue syncing. Now that your setup is complete and orders are syncing through, you're all set to go. We recommend that you review our documentation to answer any other questions you may have about our sync, and you can always open up a ticket with our 24/7 support team with any follow-up questions as well. Congratulations on taking the step to sync your WooCommerce with QuickBooks, and we look forward to assisting with any questions.